So we have time for one more question.
How do you get people in your organizations to recognize, be more observant, and be more aware of the problems that you do have or exist in your organization?
Very gently. Wow, great question.
Can I ask a clarifying question? You mean like, okay, let's say you work for General Motors and you see problems in General Motors. How would you, Mr. Manager, go and explain what some problems are that you see that may be keeping the company from going? Is that what you?
I guess how do you just get people to be more observant and aware of their surroundings and the problems that exist in their surroundings? How do you have them record stuff? Do you?
Oh, okay. So if you're out like on a consulting. Okay.
Well, I can tell you the way we typically tackle it. I mean, first of all, we have to address the fact that in most organizations, problems are not welcomed. And this is a great shame because the approach that we teach to innovation is what we call problem-focused innovation, which is simply the logic is if you, as a group of people, are at least half competent, if you find a problem, the chances are you might be able to solve it. Mm-hmm. And if you could solve it, then that puts you slightly ahead of the game. So therefore, instead of investing a lot of time and effort in trying to generate ideas, invest a lot of time and effort in trying to find interesting problems. Now, the problem with problems is that when you start encouraging people to find them, you'll run up against this issue that people don't like problems because if they're easy to solve, they tend to solve them and then forget about them, which is a great shame because we could solve them in potentially far more interesting ways than the ones which are solved just on the spur of the moment. But if they can't solve them, it makes people feel a bit upset, and they tend to hide them because it bothers them that there's a problem and they can't necessarily solve it, and it sort of nags at them, so they tend to put it out of their minds. So what we first of all try to do is to encourage people to recognize that it's perfectly okay and in fact a useful thing to collect problems. And you don't have to take responsibility for it even though you found it. And we then start trying to get people to build big walls of interesting problems and get some sort of prioritization on it to say, if it were possible to solve any of these problems, which ones might give us the most interesting results? And so you start trying to encourage that. Now, all of this, though, is predicated on the idea that you would have, first of all, made some progress on establishing a culture in which people felt that change were possible. Mm-hmm. Because if you haven't addressed that, then collecting more problems will simply increase people's stress levels. So if you go back to either Immobily or Ekval and you think about the climate, even at a small level, if you can get people to begin to address the climate, you're getting yourself a certain amount of space in which to say, and now let's try one or two of these problems. And so it's an iterative process through which people gradually recognize that actually finding problems is a good and useful thing to do, and some of those problems can be solved. But I think the hardest part about this, and we've alluded to this previously, is people often fail to see, for instance, politics or the process of selling your solution as just another problem. And so what happens is that project teams might be formed to work on a problem. They come up with a lovely idea and then find, for whatever reason, it's not accepted or not implemented. And this makes them feel very bad and they feel upset and sort of retire. Instead of recognizing that that is simply the next problem in the road, and the new problem becomes, in what ways might we think senior management came up with this solution by themselves, for instance, which is perhaps the other aspect, which is how do you sell a solution? And if you don't address this, if you don't address the climate, and if you don't address the pull-through of actually helping people to be able to sell the solution, which goes back often to what I was saying earlier about adapter-innovator theory and allowing you to present a solution in a way which makes sense to people for however they see the world, then all you're doing is moving the logjam slightly further down. So those are typically the sort of steps that we go through, probably starting with some cultural aspects first, in order to be able to get enough space to get people to start collecting problems in order for us to help them see how they might sell them. Developing the solution is not normally the hard part. It's selling it into the organization.
And just quickly, fact-finding is huge. If I have a problem at school, what I do is start to collect facts and go in and then generate questions around fact-finding. Because, and again, it can be a little bit, it depends on your perspective, but if you're writing down exactly things that you see regarding the problem, and you're going in with concrete facts, it always opens up the door, because then you can issue the invitation, this is the way I see it, now how do you see it? And that might open the door to accepting the fact that perhaps there might be a problem, because you're not going in with any kind of a judgment. I know that Andy mentioned deferring judgment before. That is so key. So if you're going in with what you perceive as the facts without any judgment around it, it's huge.
I was thinking of education while Andy was talking. I think the people who, and organizations and the think tanks, maybe about 20 years ago, who thought of ways that we need to improve American education, might be judging here, but I think a lot of them may have been more adaptive, that we can work within what we already have and make it work. I'm a strong innovator. I think we need to just take a lot of dynamite and just blow up the whole way we do education and start over a different way, because it isn't working. So, using that as an example, I think for your question, how does Miss Retired Teacher in Rochester, New York, get the people in Albany, New York State Ed, to see that having page after page after page of standards that students need to meet and teachers have to teach to pass a state test isn't helping our children be thinkers and really learn. They're not, I don't think that I have the political clout or know the right people to get them to see that we need to make an extreme paradigm shift if our kids are to survive. We spend, I think, more than any other state in the nation, and our kids are definitely not anywhere near the top. There are some states that spend less, that have some very innovative ways that they're approaching education. Why are we where we are, and how can we make changes? I don't know, except for that the kids that I work with, my little part that I can just take my passion and work with the students and the adults that I come in contact with to hopefully make an impact. I wish I knew how to make a bigger impact, you know.
Well, it's interesting in looking at this year's World Creativity Day, and Creativity Week is keep the conversation going. And as we look at the difference that you make in all your arenas, and moving into larger arenas, because we affect people who affect people who affect people, that there's great potential for what we can do in the education at the state level. And I think that more and more, those of us who coming out of a program in creativity have a voice at a larger level. So we encourage you to continue continue along those lines.
So go get my
And
dynamite.
keep the conversation going. And
Okay.
we'll have to finish up here, but I do want to say that 3 people that really have a passion came tonight, and 3 people that make a difference. So we thank Sandra, we
Thank
thank
you.
Andy, and we thank Joette. Thank you for
Thanks for
coming.
inviting us.
Yes,
welcome.
thank you. Thanks to you guys.